Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Charlie, and in today's video I'm going to be discussing the difference between film cameras and digital cameras. So in this video I'm going to be looking at the pros and cons of both film photography and digital photography. So if you're planning on buying a new camera, or you just like more of an insight into film and digital photography itself, then hopefully this video will be some help for you. So first up, we're going to be starting with film cameras. So the first pro to buying a film camera would be that normally they are quite cheap. So here I've got a Canon 8E1, and this will normally range between £100 to £200. If you are looking into buying a film camera, it doesn't necessarily have to be the size, it sort of depends on what you're going to use it for. Now a 35mm can essentially be used for anything. Now a digital camera you could probably get for that price, but it's not going to be the best quality, and normally for a digital camera it will be a good few £100s at least for a good quality one. Price difference is quite significant if you're planning on buying a film camera. Now the next pro to buying a film camera would be the nostalgia, or just this sort of feel of a film camera itself. There's just something about being able to like wind the photo up, and the suspense when you roll the film back and take it out and then either develop it yourself or send it off. Just the whole process of film photography is sort of a lot more involved than just picking up a digital camera and shooting straight away, because not everyone can capture a photograph on a film camera. A lot of people, especially being born in this generation, would have absolutely no idea how to use this. So I'd say the nostalgia and just the overall feel of a film camera definitely outweighs the usage of a digital camera. So another pro to using film photography is that when you're setting up your shots and getting the right composition, normally you spend a lot longer doing that, and you're a lot more likely to get the right shot rather than picking up a digital camera and shooting loads continuously. So for example, this is a Ilford HP5 400 ISO film. On this roller film you get 36 shots. Now 36 shots does not sound a lot, but when you're taking one or two just of a person or a specific location, it does add up over time. But if you were using 36 shots on a digital camera, for example, you'd probably only be photographing two slightly different compositions as opposed to photographing throughout the whole day. If I was to be photographing people, then I'd probably bring 2 or 3 rolls of film with me. So that's definitely one key benefit of having a film camera. You'll spend a lot more of your time focusing on the composition as opposed to just capturing away and then moving on to the next thing. So another pro to film photography would be grain. Now on this roller film it's a 400 ISO, meaning that there will be some sort of grain in there, but if you're using 600 ISO plus, then there's going to be a lot more grain in the photograph. This can be a negative or a positive, it depends what your view on it is. Obviously with a lot of photography now and the use of digital photography, making sure that you get crystal clear photographs is probably the main positive to that, and it also depends on the sort of photography that you do and if you're a fan of grain. If you're not, then I probably would recommend going down the digital route. However, if you're not too bothered if there's little particles on your photograph or if there's scratches on the film, anything like that, then I'd definitely go down the route of a film camera. Now another pro to buying a film camera would be the dynamic range. So this is to do with colour and the amount of colour it can represent in a photograph. Your sort of average film camera will have around 13, maybe 14 stops, and sort of a top end digital camera would have around 14 to 15. So if you're a photographer who has a limited budget, and if colour is definitely an important aspect in your photography, then I would definitely recommend going down the film photography route as opposed to spending the same amount on a digital camera. The final pro to buying a film camera would be just how lightweight it is. Compared to my Canon 5D Mark IV that I've got, this is literally like probably a third of the weight of that. Especially if you've got a big lens on there as well, then that's in a lot more weight. So, and if you're capturing photographs all day, then this will definitely have a lot less strain on you as opposed to top-end digital cameras at the moment. However, I would also like to point out that photographing with a film camera probably isn't as comfortable. So a lot of modern digital cameras now do have really nice grips on them, so that improves like the ergonomics of capturing photographs as opposed to film cameras like this. There's really not too much of a grip on them. It's normally just like a flat rounded body and then the lens itself. But if you're the sort of photographer who travels a lot and who needs a lightweight camera, then probably a film camera will be the way to go for that. So moving on to the cons of film photography, the first con would be film. Now film can set you back quite a bit, so initial cost of buying a film camera is not really that significant. However, there are a lot of running costs, so you've got your film, scanning your photographs as well. You can either buy like a mid-range price scanner, sort of like £50 to £100, or you can spend up to thousands of pounds on a scanner, and obviously the more expensive you go with a scanner, it will provide you with better quality and better resolution images. So a single roll of film is probably anywhere between £5 to £15. Obviously you can probably spend a little bit less if you're just getting black and white film, but if you're wanting a film that will represent skin tones really well and maybe a high ISO range, then you probably will be spending up to £15 for that sort of thing. So if you do have a budget in mind, you need to make sure that that is included in your budget, otherwise you might be shocked at how much it will end up costing you in the future. future. In terms of purchasing a scanner, I think it sort of depends on what you're planning to use it for. So if you're planning on selling your photographs or printing them out large, then obviously I'd recommend purchasing a more expensive scanner that's going to create high resolution images. But if you're just using it for Instagram and just social media work, then you could easily purchase a scanner for sort of £30 to £40, and that would be totally fine for your photography. So this next con sort of follows on from a pro that I mentioned on the film camera. So because you're taking a lot more time on the composition and all the ergonomics of the camera itself, that could also have a negative impact. So if you're planning on using the camera to photograph sports photography, for example, or photograph portraits that are involving a lot of movements, you may be a little bit slower than someone else who is using a digital camera, for example. Especially once you have finished a roll of film, then you've got to wind it all back and then put it away somewhere safe and somewhere dark and then load a new one in. Now that can probably take about 5 minutes depending how confident you are with that, and that could be 5 minutes lost in time that you've paid for a model. You may only have them for an hour, or if you are capturing something that's quite important or weather dependent and that sort of thing, then you may miss out on some photographs as opposed to if you were to purchase a digital camera and photograph them using that. And the final con to purchasing a film camera would be the use of chemicals. So whether you're sending off your film or if you're doing it yourself in like your bathtub, for example, then you either have to purchase the chemicals or chemicals will be used in order to develop the film, and they're not necessarily the best for the environment. Also, if you're developing the film yourself, then you need to make sure that you're comfortable with the use of chemicals. And being in the darkroom during university, most of the time it just smelled like eggs. That's how bad the chemicals were. There are companies out there where you can put in your rolls of film and send them off. I personally normally go to a shop called Palm Labs in Birmingham, and they deal with essentially all types of film. So if they are really important, then I probably just recommend going to somewhere that will do it for you rather than sending them off in the post, for example. So moving on to digital photography. So the first pro to using a digital camera will be that you can take as many photographs as you want. So if you're a car enthusiast or a sports photographer, for example, then being able to photograph at high shutter speeds is probably really important to you, and it's not necessarily something that you'd be able to do by purchasing a film camera. So if you're planning on taking a lot of photographs and then going into Lightroom, for example, and picking the best ones, then I probably would recommend going down the digital route. And also following on from that, another pro is that you can actually see the photographs once you've captured them, which is normally quite important for a lot of people, especially if you're starting out as a photographer. For the most part, when I'm out and about photographing, 9 times out of 10, once I've captured a photograph, the next thing I'll do is look at the image to see what I've captured. I don't necessarily change any settings once I've seen the photograph, but it is something that really does help and will improve your photography. Another pro to using a digital camera is that you can change your ISO in whatever lighting conditions you're in. Obviously, with film photography, you're just stuck to the ISO that's on the film. So you'll put this in your camera, you'll change your ISO setting on your camera to match what's on here, and that's it. So if you've purchased a film with a low ISO of 100, for example, you can't then go out and capture some night photography expecting to get perfectly exposed images. A lot of the time they will be underexposed, so you need to make sure that you're buying your film to match the environments that you want to photograph in. However, with a digital camera you can essentially photograph whatever you want, anywhere, any lighting, and it doesn't really matter. Another key pro to buying a digital camera is that most of the cameras at the moment, even around like a lower budget, would also include video. So even if you're not keen on using video now, you may want to shoot like a holiday video in the future or start YouTube. So even if you may not need it, it probably will come in handy one day. If in the back of your mind you think you may want to record video at some point, then probably a digital camera will be best for you. Also, another pro to using a digital camera is that you can learn as you go. As I mentioned before, as you've got an LCD display on your camera, it means that once you've captured a photo, you can look back at it and then improve from there. So whether your colour temperature's off or shutter speed, aperture, as soon as you capture the photo, you can have a look and then amend it. If you're really new to photography, you're probably more likely to progress further with a digital camera than a film camera during the first sort of couple of months. With a digital camera, you can see what you've captured and then amend it, so you probably will improve a lot more significantly than if you were to purchase a film camera, just because of the time it takes from capturing your 36 exposures and then sending your film off and then receiving it. That's probably taken a week, maybe even 2 if you've sent it off in the post, just so you can look back at the photos you've captured as opposed to viewing them straight away on a digital camera. However, there are also a couple of cons to buying a digital camera. So first off would be the initial cost of buying a camera. So yes, you don't have to buy any film and you don't have to buy any scanners or anything like that, but the initial cost of a digital camera at the moment is probably a lot more significant than if you were to purchase a film camera, for example. Also, if you're planning on buying any extra lenses, that is quite a substantial part of the budget that you may need to account for. A lot of lenses now can be anywhere upwards from £1,000, for example. So one key piece of advice I'd give you would be to add in the price of your initial camera and the stock lens, and maybe another lens on top of that if you're planning on purchasing that in the future, as well as with your film photography, add on the price of all the rolls of film, your scanner, and how much it will cost to send off, and probably just weigh up between the two. And the final con to purchasing a digital camera would be that digital cameras are advancing quite quickly at the moment. So if you were to purchase your camera now, a few years may pass, maybe even a couple of years, and then you may look at purchasing a new camera. So for example, with mirrorless technology, that wasn't really around a few years ago, but that's now progressing, and that's becoming sort of the main focal point on digital photography at the moment. And if you are buying a film camera, you're probably already aware that you're not buying it because of the technology that's inside of it. You're probably just buying it for the nostalgia and the feel of it and all the pros that I mentioned before. If you were to go down the film photography route, then you could branch out to buying a medium format camera, for example, or like a field camera, and build up your collection rather than going down the digital route and not really building a collection but just having the fanciest camera that's around. So that's probably a good piece of information that will help you weigh up between the two. And that's probably about it. So I hope that has helped you come up either with a decision between film or digital photography. If you ask for my personal opinion between the two, I probably would go with digital photography, but it really just does depend on what you do and how you want your photographs to come out and look like, and what sort of meaning you want behind them. If I was to weigh up between a photograph captured on film and digital, I probably would go for the film image just because I know the process behind it. For me, it probably takes a lot more courage to go down the film route. I think there's just something about film photography and film cameras and just the general feel of it that can never really be replicated in digital photography. Even if you were to edit a digital photograph to look like a film image with loads of grain and noise and dust, it is still just a representation and a reflection on a film photo. But again, it just depends on you as a person, what you're planning on producing, and the quality of photography that you want to make. So I hope that's been of some help to you. If you have any more questions, make sure to drop a comment below. I'll be more than happy to answer them. If you're also on Instagram, then make sure to hit up my Instagram, charlieallenfilm. That's where I post a lot of my content on there, normally before I post a video on YouTube. So if you want to stay up to date, then make sure to give that a follow. Make sure to hit like on this video if you enjoyed, and subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and I will see you in the next video.